Thanks for that sobering message, Damon. I think it's probably good now that we move up scales, moving away from gullies and moving downstream and out to the Great Barrier Reef. It's a real pleasure today to present alongside Roger from North Queensland Dry Tropics and the Landholders Driving Change project. And I guess I just wanted to start by saying that we were really fortunate that our NESP program coincided with the start of the LDC project, and so we were essentially provided a forum of engagement with landholders throughout the whole process of our project. And I think for anyone that's been involved in the Senate inquiry over the last year, this is hopefully the sort of model that we would be wanting to roll out across GBR. I'd like to give a big shout out to the landholders in the B, so the Bowen, Burdekin, Bogey Catchment, and of course our funding providers, the Australian Government and Queensland Government, and many others that are here on this slide. A couple of others have showed this conceptual diagram that was developed as part of the NESP synthesis project, and I guess today just to show that we're going to be going back up into the catchment in the B, and Roger will continue on at that scale, and also looking at our NESP project, which focuses downstream to the Burdekin end of river, inshore plume and northern plume, so as the Burdekin's moving up towards Magnetic Island in the Palm Island group. So we looked at both spatial and temporal scales. We sampled high flow events that occurred in 2017, 18 and 19. So looking at the big picture scale, we were looking to develop sediment tracing approach that we could use across the catchment and the marine continuum. And traditionally these sediment tracing techniques have been developed in sort of English catchments that are really small, and obviously we have a bit more problems when we're looking at a catchment the size of the Burdekin. We've got a giant dam that's causing particle fractionation, and then as we move out into the marine environment, we also have fractionation occurring, and then we have pesky little diatoms coming into the samples as well that we're collecting. And so we were fortunate to work with John Ollie to develop a tracing approach using the rare earth element to thorium ratios that would allow us to maintain that source integrity within the catchment and apply that out to those samples from flood plumes. And we were really looking at multiple lines of evidence here. I've got an example here on the bottom of the slide of discharge and sediment budget for the Burdekin River catchment. This example here is from the Cyclone Debbie event of March 2017. And you can sort of see the contributions from above the Burdekin Falls Dam and also below the Burdekin Falls Dam. With the sediment tracing that we were able to do in 2017, you can see those blue triangles there in the inshore area of the Burdekin flood plume. Sampling at both end of river and these plume sites showed that clear source back to the Bowen and Bogey subcatchments that have been such a strong focus today. In 2018 and 2019, we were able to get much further offshore, out to Old Reef in 2019 and up to 150 kilometres north of the river mouth around the Palm Island group, where we have our sediment trap sites that Steve will talk about in the next presentation. Importantly, for both end of river and flood plume samples that were collected across all three events, and these were sourced to the upper Burdekin in the subsequent years, and in 2017 to the Bogey. All of those samples were dominated, all of that sediment was dominated by subsurface erosional processes. And so this is the first time we've been able to extend our knowledge of catchment processes and sources out into the marine environment and really into those secondary plume waters travelling long distances from the river mouth, where we've got low concentration sediments. I'm going to move back up into the catchment now and refining sediment contributions today with a focus on the Bowen, Burdekin, Bogey and the community monitoring that we set up. This was a true collaborative project with Roger and other LDC staff and Steve Lewis and myself from Trotwater. and importantly with the landholders across the Triple B. So we were out doing the training, but then it was about handing over the project really to the LDC staff in terms of the engagement with the landholders and developing that trust. So we were working with catchment modellers, in this case Cameron Dougal, to try to locate sites across the catchment where we think we've got the least data confidence, if you like, for model improvement. And so we were really giving Roger and the team some difficult tasks in terms of some really specific sites that we needed them to engage landholders on to collect water samples for us. So there's a map here that just shows the 9 sites across the Triple B, which included the Burdekin, the Bowen, a big focus on the Little Bowen subcatchment where we had historic data, and also the Bogie River subcatchment. Initially, we discovered 2 wet seasons, a part of that LDC program, and then we were fortunate enough over the last wet season with the Reef Trust Partnership to continue, just focusing on sediments this time. Obviously, there was a really strong aim in terms of the engagement of landholders in catchment scale water quality. And I mentioned about the modelling. And really critically, the NESP project in combination with this added a sediment tracing approach, extending our tracing right through the system, and also the catchment to reef approach. So allowing us to go back out there, talking to landholders about local water quality, but also moving out to the Great Barrier Reef Lagoon. Okay, so just to give you an idea of some of the data summary, you can see here the 9 sites with average sediment concentrations over the first 2 wet seasons worth of water quality data. The larger the circle and darker in colour, the higher sediment concentrations. And we really had that high variability between the headwater rainforested Broken River catchment and the Little Bowen subcatchment. And you can see there by the sample numbers, we had excellent sampling. We were really fortunate at some of the key sites. We were hoping to capture some really great samplers. And I've got an example here from the Broken River where there's actually a flow gauge, which is a bit of a plus. And you can see the different colours here represent all the different events that landholder sampler collected for us over the, you've got river height on the right, over the 2 wet seasons. Another example from the Bogie River where we were able to add to historical data sets where we had actually the same landholder sampler collecting samples for us last decade. And I guess this one probably just gives you a bit of an idea where we can compare to the source catchments, the Sediment model, the EMC, which is probably looking a little bit low potentially for this site. So another component of NESP was really for us to bring in historic sediment tracing data for the Bowen catchment, including some of my own. A shout out to Scott Wilkinson and Rebecca, CSIRO, for some of their data, and also Alex, who's here today, and Joe Burton from Landscape Sciences, Queensland Government. And using our sediment tracing approach, we were able to show multiple lines of evidence here that it's the Little Bowen subcatchment that's the dominant source contributor to the Myuna gauge of the Bowen, covering about 70% of that catchment. I guess a key thing to note here is we really focused on this subcatchment in terms of landholder engagement with the 3 sites, and so we've actually captured and engaged with 3 landholders of the 6 probably grazing properties within that one subcatchment and brought them along this journey. And the next space for us really now is to look at the area of alluvial gullies downstream of the Myuna gauge and the contribution of those gullies to Inkerman, the end of the river, versus what's upstream of Myuna. Through this process, we've been working with CAM, the catchment modellers, and I just wanted to give a couple of quick examples here where we were able to use long-term discharge data from the model with our averages to show a comparison of the monitored data on the left with the modelled. And so for some subcatchment sites where we had enough samples that have been collected, like Pelican Creek here, we've got quite an amazing comparison between the monitored and modelled loads. For somewhere like the Burdekin River, well, the model's probably still slightly overestimating sediment contribution, and somewhere like the Bogey, potentially too low. And unfortunately, whilst we did really well in lots of these sites, the western area of the Bowen catchment, we probably still need more samples to be collected before we can do the same sort of comparison there. I guess just to say as well that Cam and I have actually now used this approach up into the Upper Burdekin and helping with the prioritisation for the Upper Burdekin Reef Trust Partnership Grant. Thanks, Roger.
Rightio, thank you, Zoe. As we've heard in a number of the talks about the LDC project, it's basically a grassroots approach to erosion reduction, combining the best of Grazier's knowledge with the latest in scientific research. Again, as a few of the speakers have talked today, there is a wonderful engagement platform opportunity from interacting with landholders, and this project provides that. It's a safe place to talk about some issues, particularly the sensitive thing about sediment with the whole pollution aspect, and it's an interaction point for technical specialists, other landholders in the area, a great monitoring opportunity, and also a way to understand that catchment to reef story which we're all trying to tell. Buster O'Loughlin from Exvale Station, he's the guy in the middle, he's part of our program, he's also on our grazing panel. He's having a bit of a Kodak moment with Steve and Barbara Coles, who's our monitoring officer for the project. Now, a few of the previous speakers have touched upon engagement, and when we take that all back, it is not a given on any project. And trust is big time to graziers. You might have someone who's an expert in their field, many years' experience, multiple degrees, but that often means not much to people on the land. And often to get people involved in a project, we've got to overcome that, get that familiarity, and build that trust. Zoe mentions site value on a lot of these sites. We don't, because they're big properties, we don't have landholders right nearby. So to get those critical parts of the catchment, we really have only one shot with that landholder family. There is no backup. So it really guides how we sell that opportunity to them. There's obviously the reliability of taking these samples. As much as many would like to believe, graziers have a life outside work, and you won't find them on the station 365 days a year. And also opportunity. People can get really keen in the project. There's fluctuations in rainfall during the year, and not often it's timed at the right time for people to sample. So getting people ready and enthused, even when it's a minor wet season, is a big task there. And look, as Zoe said, it's low cost, it's real-time data. We don't have the choppers, we don't have the automated samplers, we just got the landholders, so we go with that. The feedback loop of communication to the catchment through our project, which is Grazier-led, we do it through a number of information platforms. One is our regular newsletter, The Grit, and another platform is our annual reporting, where Zoe's words are then laid out by our communications team, Nadine and Ted, into a booklet which goes out to the catchment, and the NESP story is there the whole way through. Another opportunity we have is an annual dinner where the results get put back to the community. And I'd just like to say, with all due respect, Damon, when you've got Steve and Zoe, who needs Tom Cruise? And plus we can't afford him anyway, so it's a great night where both project staff like myself, project panel members, and people participating in the program can hear from Steve and Zoe, ask all those highbrow questions, lowbrow questions. There might not be an easy answer, but at least we're talking about it and getting that cross-collaboration going, and transparency of data sharing, which is big. On nights such as these, we do review the feedback from people there, and there's a few comments up on the handout here, but the main thing is that this catchment-wide project story is resonating amongst the crowd. Each landholder who participates in the program gets an individual report which has only their data on it, which is a very personalised touch in this project, which a lot of landholders believe. And as we follow them on the journey of the project, we find quite a bit of increasing detail as they move from one year to the next in the project. And over time, we often find that we're uncovering hidden skills amongst landholders, and many of them are like little secret hydrographers, and which is great to see. And from a layperson who just thinks, yeah, they go out and sample water, to get their water samples, often they'll have to go out maybe a dozen times, might be early in the morning, driving rain, and check the water level, and then decide at a certain point, I'll measure now, and take a few measures, and then try to interpret that and put it up in a form that's suitable for us to make sense of. So we really appreciate landholders doing that at all times of night. And the recent wet season we had for the Collinsville people, their biggest flow came on Christmas morning from about 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. So that's a really big ask for those landholders to get their samples in. It's on our website, so if there's time, check it out. Very user-friendly, and a number of different ways of telling the story to all people. And just touching back on the project again, it's a really great leverage point for other opportunities, interactions in our project, whether it be the gully work with some of the organisations and consultants who have already spoken today. It could be pasture stuff involving other technical specialists, or even doing a bit more data collection, which we're all keen to see in the project. We also managed to get a bit of cross-leverage across other programs, both internal and external, to our project. And just to demonstrate the value of closing that feedback loop, Glenn Ray, one of our project participants at the end of the Bogie River system, a really important collection point, had the confidence after a couple of years to step up during a bus tour for our project and talk to other landholders about his experiences and the value of what he's doing to the wider catchment. So that's something we look for, and it's just great to see when that can happen in person. And I'd just like to finish by saying a big thank you to Steve and Zoe from the BBB community, because by coaxing them outside the lab, we're finding that they're friends and not foes. They're not just harvesting data for government. They're not just the thin edge of regulation. They're one of us. They humanise the data, and importantly, they deliver on time and on budget. Thank you.